Chapter 56, First Green Orb, 5th bonus chapter of the week. Dreadfort Castle. POV of Domeric Bolton. It has been a while since Domeric returned from the expedition of the True North. Since he upgraded his tattoo there, he has been waiting eagerly for this day. And finally, the time he awaited came. He was at Godwoods, sitting cross-legged at the foot of the heart tree of the castle while meditating. His level 2 tattoo had nearly replenished its magic, and he was about to get his first level 2 green rewards. Nothing happened unpredictably while he was waiting, and the symbol of Deathly Hallows had finally totally replenished. He sent his consciousness into his tattoo. From his experiments in the past, he knew that time would freeze in the outside world and only his consciousness would go into the tattoo, not his body. So he didn't need to worry about his body's safety. When he arrived at the Endless Void again, he looked around and saw 3 white orbs and 1 green orb. He was a little surprised by this sight. He expected that there would be only 2 white orbs and 1 green orb in this space. Shouldn't the number of low-level rewards be doubled? While 1 new level reward appears when the symbol rises to the 2nd level. Where did the 3rd white orb come from? He thought. But he couldn't get the answers he sought by standing, so he wished, and orbs floated toward him until they stopped in front of him. To find an answer to his recent question, he inspected white orbs first, and then he understood why there were 3 white orbs. One of the white orbs wasn't a new reward but a reward from the last time when he came here. A book called Shoemaking. Well, as you can understand from the title of the book, it was a book containing all kinds of shoemaking techniques and methods. He didn't choose to get this reward last time but to sacrifice gathered magic to upgrade the symbol. So, does this mean that rewards I didn't choose to get wouldn't be lost but accumulated here? If that is the case, it is good. I can get them in the future if I need them, he thought before looking at other white orbs. A book called Clothes and Fashion and a Bracer? He extends him toward them to gather their information. The book was about different kinds of clothes from different eras with their sewing methods from his past life. Well, it was good knowledge, but he didn't need it at the moment. It might be another good way to earn money, but he had already a lot of ongoing projects at the moment and didn't want to start a new project just for money and fashion. And most importantly, he didn't have any knowledge about creating fabric. And without different kinds of fabric, he couldn't make most of the clothes in the book. So it was an unnecessary reward for him at the moment. But maybe he could get it in the future if he needed it. As for the 3rd white orb, it was a bracer. When he got information about the bracer, he realized it wasn't a just bracer but a hidden weapon. A hidden blade that can be released with a wrist move. It was a cool tool for an assassin, but it was useless to him. After all, if he wanted to kill someone secretly, he could do it magic and nobody would know it. But this is the first time I have seen something different from books as rewards. Does that mean I can get items as well from now on? Is it because of the upgrade? Probably. Anyway, I will know in the future. For now, let's see the main reward. And finally, he looked at the green orb, the level 2 reward. He extended his hand towards it and information about the reward flowed into his mind. It was a book called Flying Magical Items, which included different kinds of craftsmanship methods and runic enchantments to craft flying items. The magical ones. The book also included different types of spells and charms that should or could be used on flying objects. He is disappointed. It was a good reward. He could make a flying broomstick for himself now. Maybe a firebolt or an even more advanced broomstick than a firebolt. But he expected more advanced rewards. This reward was just another book that included some knowledge, albeit a magical one. After all, his ultimate goal was to resurrect his parents and his loved ones from his past life. How many times did he have to upgrade his tattoo to get that reward with this kind of improvement? Ha! I should have known it wouldn't be easy. Looks like I have to upgrade the symbol many more times to get there. With a depressed mood, he grabbed the green orb and left the Endless Void. At least with this reward, he didn't need to constantly apparate to reach a new location that he'd never been to before while traveling. A broomstick would make his future journeys easier. Outside of the Dreadfort Castle. POV of villager Tom. Tom reached the final line and ran a little distance more before he fell to the ground in exhaustion. His muscles burned with an intensity that he had never felt before, and he felt like retching out all the food he ate in the morning. And he was thirsty. Oh, so thirsty. Someone suddenly passed him a cup of water. He looked up with some difficulty and realized that it was a boy who was giving water to all the participants. He murmured a quick thanks, gulped down the water as quickly as possible, and gave it back to the boy who moved on in order to quench the thirst of the other participants. He looked around him to find how many people had arrived and found that only 100 or so many people had completed the race so far. Thank the gods. It at least meant that he would pass this round. They had started the day with some 4,000 men who arrived outside Dreadfort in order to join the army. Of those, quite a few were disqualified because of their lack of height and unhealthy bodies. Of the ones that were left, they had to go through a lot more exercises, like pushing himself off the ground 30 times with his hands and pulling himself up on a bar a dozen times. In the end, the selected participants were all told to run a long path that was created especially for them. They were told that only the top 500 people who arrived at the finishing line would be selected for the army. And he had clearly arrived among the top 500. He was sure of it even if he didn't know the numbers. He had no idea why they were told to run like this, but he was sure that the men under Lord Bolton knew what they were doing. As he finally stood up despite all the protest of his leg, he saw that more and more men were arriving at the finish line with each passing minute and was glad that at least he would be selected for the army. Now he just hoped that he wouldn't have to run so much every day once he joined the army. However, he did wonder how their instructors would train them in order to prepare them for the wars that they might have to fight in the future. Chapter 57 Whale Monopoly. Dreadfort Castle. POV of Domeric Bolton. Ser Jorah Mormont recently sold some prisoners as slaves. Lord Stark found out about this, and when he went to dispense justice, he ran off with his wife while bankrupting the Mormont family. His new spy mistress informed him, and he took a moment to absorb the information he had just heard. Ser Jorah Mormont, the person who earned his knighthood from the king after the battle at Pike, and then won the jousting competition in Lannisport as well as the hand of that Hightower girl there? He asked, and his spy mistress nodded. What would promote him to sell men to slavers? And how did he bankrupt his family? He asked curiously. His wife had expensive tastes, the spy mistress said with a deadpan look, and he looked incredulously at the woman for a long moment before he burst into laughter. Wow, I've heard about husbands being devoted to their wives. But to think that he bankrupted his whole house in order to impress his wife, he said and shook his head, not liking this Mormont fella at all. Do you want me to put a bounty on his head? His spy mistress asked, and he shook his head. No, the life of a disgraced knight who has lost his home will be harder for him than a quick death. Plus, how long will his wife remain with him now that he doesn't have any money to spend on her? He said with a snort. Not to mention that it would be improper for me to put a bounty on him as he didn't belong to the Bolton house. After that, they sat in silence in his solar as he wondered what he should do next. Lord Jeor Mormont left Bear Island to serve the Night's Watch a few years ago. So, who is running the Bear Island right now? He asked, remembering the stoic old man who had greeted him at Castle Black. Jeor Mormont's sister Meege Mormont, his spy mistress informed. A woman? He asked with some amusement. After all, men in Westeros tended to think that women were only good for running household duties and nothing else. But if there are no other men left in House Mormont to run the house, then such a thing would be understandable. House Mormont's women are said to be fierce warriors, his spy mistress said, and he gave a nod in return. If his people are constantly harassed by the wildlings from the north and Iron Islanders from the south, then the women within his lands would learn how to wield an axe as well. You need to adapt in order to survive. Send them 20 plows, 20 seed drills, 40 oxen, and 4 bags of HYV seeds, he said. My lord? She asked with some surprise. Did I stutter? He asked with some amusement as she shook her head calmly. No, but you've never given the high-yielding variety seeds to anyone else. She pointed out and he shrugged. I'm feeling charitable today, he said. Left unsaid was the fact that the Boltons had a rather bad reputation thanks to the actions of his ancestors, and he wanted to change that reputation within his lifetime. He was already preparing some luxury gifts for the houses at North, but it would be better if could help some of them when they were in need. I'll see it done, but I'm afraid that they won't accept charity. The people of Bear Island might be bankrupt and desperate for help, but they have a fierce pride of their own. She informed him and he nodded. If they don't accept it as charity, then simply tell them to pay me back when they have enough wealth of their own, he said. And don't charge them too much as it would defeat the purpose of helping them. The spy mistress gave a bow, and he expected her to leave, but when she didn't, he looked at her with a questioning glance. The whaler ships that we sent out in order to hunt the whales in the Shivering Sea got interference from the Ibbenese people. That is understandable, he said. The Ibbenese people have a monopoly on the whaling business and wouldn't like it if someone else interfered with it. I'm guessing you already know how to deal with this problem? She asked, and he gave a nod. Send Murin to hunt down anyone who tries to interfere with my ships, he said. Tell him to take the new war galleys that the shipwrights from the Lannisport and Iron Islands made. You mean the war galleys that they made with your designs? She asked with some amusement, and he gave a nod. Yes, Murin is an excellent captain and should be able to deal with them on his own. But if he fails, then I'll go to Ibn and deal with this situation myself. His spy mistress nodded and bowed her head to him before leaving the Solar. As she left the room, he sat down on his rotating chair and looked outside the castle where the men were digging the foundation of the building which would serve as a school for his people. His men had already bought learned slaves from across the Essos to his lands. By now, he had more than 200 people within his lands who were literate, and he was already putting them to good use by giving them administrative work or having them teach the new generation of his citizens. The blackboards and chalk that he invented as well as the new books printed by the printing press helped matters as well. Now he just needed to deal with the bandits and poachers that had propped up in his lands. Chapter 58. All I see are children, women, and old people. 6th bonus chapter of the week. Dreadfort Castle. POV of Domeric Bolton. I don't like this. His aunt murmured anxiously as she paced back and forth across the room, while he was stoically looking outside the window where a large procession of 1,300 wildling people was being taken to one of the empty pastures that he had selected for them at an earlier date. I know, but it is done. Worrying about it won't change anything, he said with a shrug, although he was slightly worried about how anxious she seemed about this whole affair. After all, he did love her like a mother. He never had and didn't want to cause her too much trouble. They're wildlings. She cursed while looking at them, though all he could see were some desperate people who were running from the others. After reading the minds of some of the people, he was sure that they believed the undead were rising beyond the wall. Undeads who had bright blue eyes and didn't die even if you tore them in half. But none of them had ever seen a White Walker, so he still wasn't sure of their existence. Though in his heart, he knew that they existed. The problem was that he couldn't just go around telling such things to the other lords, as it would cause too much panic among them. He looked outside, and where his aunt saw these cursed wildlings, he just saw children, women, old people, and a few men. When he had gone to Hardhome with his small fleet in order to fulfill the promise he had given to Mance Rayder, he had found more than 2,100 people waiting for him on the shores, as well as Mance Rayder and Tormund Giantsbane. Those 2,100 free folks were being led by 6 different leaders. Unfortunately, 2 of them were lying to him and had no intention of settling down quietly within his lands. They instead planned to pillage his lands and go further south to find safety. He had denied them the passage to his lands, telling Mance Rayder about their true intentions. A fight almost broke out right then and there as the 2 leaders refused to accept his decision, but Mance Rayder was finally able to calm everything down, and Domeric was able to bring the remaining 1,300 free folks to his lands, but not before all the leaders promised to follow the law and not harm other men and women in his lands. Thankfully, Murin was capable of braving the sea without sailing near the seashores, so the men from the East Watch didn't find out about his secret trip to Hardhome. Now he just had to make sure that other people wouldn't find out about him harboring free folks within his lands. But even if they did, it was not like there was any law against doing such a thing. And if it came to war, then he already had a standing army of 1,300 men, with 1,000 more being trained in a hidden place. Not to mention the levies that he'll be able to raise, the giants, and the wargs that would fight for him if someone tried to challenge him. Though admittedly, he would rather have peace than see his men fight a meaningless battle. After all, if White Walkers were real, then that meant when the time came, they had to fight against an undead army that had maybe millions of soldiers. And to fight against that kind of army, the whole North or whole Westeros had to combine their power and resources. Otherwise, there wouldn't be a North or Westeros in the future. So, there shouldn't be unnecessary disputes in the North. At least, till they won against the others. Also, he didn't want to conquer the North or Westeros with an army and bloodshed. The land of Bolton was on par in size with the small countries of his old world. If these lands could be used efficiently, they could accommodate millions of people. So, his priority was to improve and develop his land to make it a self-sufficient land. Of course, there were some resources that he didn't have in his lands, but he could get them from others peacefully for now till he could find these resources somewhere else and make them his own permanently. After all, he wasn't a normal person but a wizard who could cast magic. And a lot of incredible things could be achieved with magic. Ha! I thought I could develop my lands peacefully, but looks like I need to prepare for a war against the others. Shouldn't my second life be more peaceful? Why would I have to fight against the undeads from a legend? He looked outside where there were free folks again. He thought that accepting those people was the right choice. Otherwise, they would die at the hands of others, rise as undead, and join the undead army. I need more soldiers, more blacksmiths, more generals, more craftsmen. I need more people. That was Dameric's primary problem since he became a lord. He didn't have enough man. In the past that was still okay, but now with the danger from the true north, the clock began ticking for him, for the north, or maybe for the whole world. Should I get some slaves from free cities at Essos and free them when they arrive in my lands? No, not now. I don't have a strong army at the moment. What if the slaves decided to rebel after even they were free from slavery? They did at Essos after all in the past. I can get some slaves, but not too many. But that way I still can't get enough people for my lands. He thought of luring people from other lords' lands, but lords and Lord Stark definitely wouldn't allow that. After all, people were also a resource for them. He could try to buy people from them, but they might sell him some, but definitely not so much. But what about he didn't lure people from other lands, but small folks came to his lands themselves willingly? Yes, that could be done easily. Of course, he would lure them, but not openly. He could send some people to other lands to praise Bolton Land's prosperity discreetly. When the lords realized that somehow lots of their people migrated to Bolton Lands, they couldn't do anything about it anymore. They would probably demand justice from Lord Stark, but could Lord Stark punish him because he was good at developing his land? No way. Well, at most Dameric would give them some gold to shut their mouth. This is a good opportunity. This way I can give some funds to other houses to improve their land. If we want to fight against the others, we have to unite our strength and resources. But northern houses is too poor and prideful. If I want to give them gold, they will reject it flatly. But if I gave them some compensation, they would accept while smiling, right? Killing two birds with one stone was always enjoyable. He loved doing that. Chapter 59. Another expedition? Bolton Lands. POV of Dameric Bolton. Dameric sat quietly on a chair while looking over the training of his 1,000 men in the hidden location. Varamer, Briar, and Orell sat beside him and looked over at the hundreds of drawings in front of them. These were the drawings of all the animals, birds, and other living beings that could be controlled by a warg. He had promised them any animal or bird that they desired since they had worked very hard for the past year, and he wanted to reward them for their hard work. After a long moment, Varamer stood up from his place. He gave him a piece of paper that he selected from the pile and said, "I want this." He looked at the paper and found it looked like a Komodo dragon from his past life. Just, it was much larger and had 6 legs to support its weight. "You want a basilisk?" he asked. "I want this." "Yes." Varamer replied without any preamble, and he gave a nod. Then Varamer left along with the dozens of animals that he was now able to control with his will. After he had left, Briar stood up from her seat and gave him a paper. It had the drawing of a brown-belly wyvern, and Dameric whistled in appreciation. "Good choice. You do realize that it will be very hard for me to find and bring you this wyvern, right? And even if I bring it here, there is a small chance that you might not be able to control it with your warging abilities. Do you want to take this risk?" he asked, and Briar nodded with a mischievous smile. "I won't fail," she said confidently before she climbed onto a horse and left along with the dozens of ravens that she had started to control on her own. In the end, Orell gave him a diagram as well, and Dameric gave a sigh upon looking at it. "A shadow-wing wyvern. Can't say I fault your choice," he said with a thin smile. After all, these wyverns were the largest of their kind, and they only came out to hunt in the dark. This meant that even finding one of them was going to be difficult for people, let alone capture it. Which meant that he'd have to go to the Sithorios personally if he wanted to keep his promise to his wargs. "You promised," Orell said with a frown, and he gave a nod. "Yes, that I did. But I'll only be able to bring you a smaller one, as the larger ones won't fit in a ship. You understand?" Orell bristled at being given a small wyvern instead of a full adult one. But he knew better than to test his patience and gave a short bow and left. Once they had left, his spy mistress, a talented woman he had bought in Lys, approached him. "My lord, most of the wood and plants that you asked for have finally arrived in Dreadfort." He raised an eyebrow at that bit of news. After he got the book called Flying Magical Items, he wanted to create a flying broom for himself so that he could travel to places that he had not seen before. But selecting the proper wood for it was important, so he had asked his subordinates to bring him all the wood from the different kinds of trees that were present in Westeros. Actually, The book included knowledge about different kinds of wood or any other materials that are needed to create flying items. But knowing and experiencing were not the same thing. He did not know whether the trees in his old world and the trees with the same name or similar trees in this world had the same characteristics. There were also tree species in this world that did not exist in the old world. So, he wanted to experiment with wood from different trees from this world and asked his people to gather them. And it seemed that his order was finally here. "Thank you for informing me, Lyra. I will check them later. You can go back to your business if nothing else," he said, and she gave him a short bow which clearly showed him all the right curves. "As you wish, my lord. Then I will go back to my business," she said with a mischievous smile and left. Once she had left, he once again gazed at the men training in the field up ahead and wondered how long it would take before they were able to learn proper discipline. He wanted to create a disciplined army, not a group of people who could fight personally but knew nothing about organizing, collective action, and discipline. The strength of an army comes from its ability to organize itself quickly and to act collectively according to its orders. Otherwise, there would be no difference between them and headless chickens. Because of that, he was inspecting the training of his army from time to time. He wanted the instructors and soldiers to feel his presence and not to slack in their training. But still, things were going slowly. Should I buy some unsullied from Astapor? It would create mayhem in the north if the lords found that I created an unsullied army. Even King wouldn't be silent about it. They would probably think that I was preparing for a rebellion against the north to become a Red King. He thought as he watched his men train and tried to find a solution to his dilemma. If lords of the north see a White Walker or a white with their own eyes, that would change everything, right? Lord Stark is like a brother to the king. So, if he tells the king about the other, the king will probably believe him. And while the king and the lords in the north worry about the danger at their door, they shouldn't say anything about him expanding his standing army and buying an unsullied army from Essos. They even might be happy about it. After a while, he completed his thoughts. But that means, I need to go beyond the wall and bring back a White or White Walker. Ha! Is there another expedition to the true north in the future? He thought while letting out a sigh. Chapter 60 Shipbuilding Factory. 7th bonus chapter of the week. Free City of Bravos. POV of Domeric Bolton. Domeric was in his port town at the mouth of the Weeping Water River and was looking at the construction of his new shipbuilding factory at the moment. A few days ago, he apparat to Bravos and took a good look at the large bookstore at first. The bookstore belonged to him, and it sold books that were produced by his printing press. It was the largest bookstore in Bravos, and he opened similar bookstores in some of the other free cities as well as King's Landing and Gulltown of Vale. Even though the literacy rate was really low in this world, there were still lords and their castle folk, merchants, maesters, and other rich or well-educated people. So, the sales were going well. Of course, it couldn't be compared to sales from bookstores in his old world. But he already had other plans for the stores. At the moment, they were selling only books, but in time he would sell other things at the stores in the future. Like his board games and other inventions of him. After a few years, when people entered his stores, they would think that they had come to a different world. Especially when he started selling the stuff from his last reward. A while ago, he got another level 2 green reward from the symbol of Deathly Hallows. Just like before, he was disappointed about the reward. It was a book called Alchemy Owls. As the title suggests, it was a book about how to produce magic owls with alchemy. It was a good reward, but it wasn't necessary for him. After all, he had his magical mirrors and gave them to people from his inner circle already. As for contacting other houses, there were still ravens that were tamed at the citadel by maesters. But it wasn't totally useless. Although ravens could carry messages to castles, keeps, and other places, they could only go forth and back at the same route that they tamed for. And they could carry only small missives and letters. Owls, on the other hand, could carry larger letters and deliver messages anywhere and to anyone as long as they were given a name. So, he thought he could create alchemy owls in the future for his castle's communication needs. And he could sell the owls at his bookstores to create another income for himself. If he did that, then he wouldn't need the ravens in the future, which also meant he wouldn't need Citadel's help anymore. And becoming independent in another thing would bring him one step closer to his goals. After checking up on the bookstore, he went to the Iron Bank and returned the 100,000 gold dragons as well as the interest. Not that he ever used the wealth that he borrowed from them, but appearances needed to be kept. After that, the Iron Bank showed interest in buying the printing press from him, and he would have been willing to sell them the old version of the printing press because a new model of printing press was already produced by his people. But Iron Bank wanted an exclusive trade deal for it, so he refused. After all, once he started selling his printing press, he would sell it to as many people as possible so that literacy could spread in the world. And even then, he would only sell the old models to others. After all, why should he give away the advantage that he obtained with great difficulty to others? So, selling them solely to the Bravosi people would defeat that purpose. After that, the deal fell through. But they were still interested in buying the armor and weapons made up of frost steel, and placed a large order which he had no reason to decline. Not like he was short of money, but working on too many projects was burning too much money, and he would rather not steal any more gold from the others, as it was a bad strategy in the long term. After all, others needed money to buy his products, right? But maybe he could visit some bad people to borrow some money from them. Of course, his only purpose would be to put money into circulation, nothing else. Once he left the Iron Bank, he went to check up on the main reason why he came to Bravos. And the main reason was the shipbuilding factory in Bravos that was capable of building one war galley in a single day during wartime. He had a lot of shipwrights in his lands as well as a lot of engineers and builders. So he decided that instead of having them build ships of their own, one by one, he would rather create a whole new factory where they would all be able to work in unison and produce better results. So he spent the next few days noting down all the details of the shipbuilding factory. Something that he wouldn't have been able to do if he hadn't been a wizard. But in the end, he was able to take careful notes of every single procedure and was sure that his men would be able to create such a factory within half a year. And even if his shipwrights were not as experienced as these men from Bravos, they would still be able to produce better ships with the new ship designs that he had in his hand. With that done, he returned to Dreadfort and started the construction of the shipbuilding factory at the mouth of the Weeping Water River where the port was being built. Because of all the construction work going on in his lands, more and more people were arriving from different parts of Westeros, but he had a feeling that with the way he was starting new projects every day, he would never have enough manpower under him. After all, the idea of building the grandest library in the whole world was still just an idea that would take some time for him to create. He would probably start its construction by the end of the year once the builders have completed the other projects and are able to start building the library, which would even put the Citadel to shame.